Good morning, everybody. I'm a little bit late because I was looking for my microphone and it have misplaced it somewhere. I have no idea where. Um, but I just wanted to go ahead and try to come on here anyway and go ahead and start with my broadcast. And if you can't hear me, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to probably buy a new microphone because I looked everywhere for it and I can't find it. And so that's the way it is when you have a bunch of kids. So I am going to be talking about Micah today. Micah is my third oldest. He has disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, and that's what DMD stands for, and that's what I'm going to be discussing today. Like my other boys, I did a PowerPoint presentation with some pictures and things like that, so I'm going to pull that up and I will get started. That way you can share this video later without a whole bunch of talking in the beginning. So again, I'm going to be looking to decide to use my laptop. So here we go. All right. So Micah and DMDD by me, Ava Muller. This is Micah. Isn't he so cute? All right. So Micah was, oh, I missed the word, was born in 2009. And he was born via C-section due to having the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck 4 times that prevented him from getting into the birth canal. He had an uncomplicated early life and was a very quiet baby. He was well behaved and hardly ever cried. He reached his goals and, uh, and walked on time and talked on time, and everything changed about the time that Micah was 3 years old. So, just to give you a little information from here in addition to this. So the only thing that was complicated about Micah's birth is that he had the umbilical cord around his neck quite tight that his head couldn't even get into the birth canal. So I did have to have a C-section in order for him to be born. But once he was born, there were no issues. His Apgar scales were good. His development was good. His speech was good. And he was a very quiet baby. He hardly ever cried. He was very content. Never had any problems with feeding him. He was just a good baby. Micah's toddler years when everything began to change. So, give me just 1 second. Abijah, go play. Mommy's on doing a broadcast. Please. Thank you. All of my kids are at school except for Abijah. So he can be pretty good. Watch some TV and play, and he might interrupt me every once in a while. So anyway, about 3 years, when Micah was about 3 years old, he began to have extreme anxiety. He was very scared of large animals, large sounds, thunderstorms, and going to new places. He stayed around mom and dad and did not want to leave our side. He was initially diagnosed as having autism, although this diagnosis would later be removed. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. In addition to the anxiety and lower social skills, Micah began to see and hear things that no one else did. He did not know what to do with, we did not know what to do with this at the time. And he was very detailed in telling us about an old man that he always saw and talked to, but there was no one like that in his life. His behavior became odd and more severe as he began to act out and focused on evil and dark concepts. So I know that some of you are familiar with Micah that know our family, and but a lot of people don't know the very beginnings of things that happened with him. So the anxiety was interesting because Micah, he would have full-on panic attacks if we just mentioned that we were going to someone's house and he knew they had a dog. He would hear loud sounds and he would go hide behind things. Even just like dropping the toilet seat would terrify him. He had I don't know if that was like part of why he was like always so quiet when he was younger, but he hardly ever talked. And so autism, and the reason he got an autism diagnosis at this stage in his life was because the autism is based on a deficit in three things. And I know that this video isn't about autism, but I'm just going to bring it up briefly so that I can explain a little bit why we thought that was the initial diagnosis for people who may also be in the same situation that we are in, is that there has to be a deficit in speech and language, a deficit in social interaction, and a deficit in, and also having rote or repetitive stereotypical behaviors. Nowadays, you can also be on the spectrum if you don't have a deficit in one of these three areas, but it's typically a different term. So if you don't have a deficit in language, but you have a deficit in social skills and you have rote behaviors, that's what we used to call Asperger's. Now they don't differentiate that anymore. Asperger's is considered just autism now. There also used to be a pervasive developmental disorder where you didn't quite meet all three of those categories. But again, I think they're including pervasive developmental disorder also in autism. So it's a lot of complicated things with that, with the changes with the new DSM and criteria and trying to get treatment for kids. So essentially, Micah did have a deficit in all three areas. He did not speak. He was very, very quiet. But his delay in language could have been due to anxiety, not due to a deficiency in speech. The social skills and the lack of them could also have been due to anxiety. And he never really had rote behaviors. He just had odd focuses. And like I mentioned, he saw a man who he claimed was his grandfather and would described him as this older gentleman with gray hair, that he was really old, which, to a 3-year-old, old is, I don't know what old is. I mean, I'm old to a 3-year-old, I guess. And he had a house and a car, and he said it looked like our house, but it was a little bit different. And he had his own car. And I mean, it was very, very detailed, to the point where I literally would say, okay, well, take me to his house or take me to his car. And he would attempt to take me, but then he would get outside and he'd be like, I don't know where he is. And he also heard growling noises in his closet, and he had nightmares. So initially, let's see, what did I put on that? Okay, so initially we started with just treating the anxiety and the autism. So we got him in behavioral therapy for ABA, for the autism, and speech therapy. He also went to early preschool, to work on the social skills, to work on the language, to help increase the lack of anxiety in social situations. And we also did start him on a medication for anxiety. Now, I mentioned the focus on the dark subjects and seeing things that weren't there. And I was told it's just his imagination, it's his age, those are normal things. So it kind of just didn't get addressed at the time. All right. And I know Carl and Denise, you might have a different take on this, and it's been a learning process. So moving on to the next one, Micah's early years. So by the time Micah was 5 years old, he was so out of control that he was running into the streets, trying to open a car door while driving down the road, trying to jump out of a second-story window, and trying to hurt his baby brother, like trying to smash his head. He tried to stab himself in the hand, and this was the last straw for me. I knew he needed more help than he was getting, and at this time, he was seeing a psychiatrist for medication management and was getting ABA therapy. No one would ever acknowledge him seeing or hearing things that were not there, and honestly, they still do not acknowledge that. I guess sometimes they will acknowledge it, they just don't address it. They kind of maybe label it possible psychosis, but they just kind of leave it at that. So this was a very extreme time for Micah, and he was impossible to manage. He just was so difficult to handle, and I had no idea what to do with him. He was just a handful and a half. So we decided to have Micah taken to a special facility for young children that needed inpatient psychiatric care. He was there for 10 days where he was where his diagnosis was changed to disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, or DMDD. And that's what we're going to talk about in this PowerPoint. He was put on a set of medications, taught some coping skills, and he came home with continued treatment, including counseling and behavior therapy. So DMDD is something that is new, has not been part of the DSM before the most recent one, and they removed childhood bipolar from, and they replaced it with this because they found that a lot of children would have symptoms similar to bipolar, but they would grow out of it. And there was other kids that would have similar symptoms with not being able to regulate their emotions and have these massive temper tantrums. But as they got older, their diagnosis would change, or they would completely grow out of it and not have any issues anymore at all. So they added this to the DSM-5 as disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. The medications that they decided to place him on were mainly Risperdal, which is an antipsychotic, and it also has been shown to decrease violent and aggressive behaviors in those on the spectrum, as well as the continued Zoloft and an ADHD medication, which I had talked about ADHD in other broadcasts. And I'll be honest with you, I still don't understand Micah. There's so many things that are confusing to me, and I think many people that have this diagnosis of DMDD and have dealt with psychiatric inpatient care probably feel the same way. It's confusing and hard to understand why they do these things that make no sense to us. We're like, well, why would you stab yourself in the hand? Like, you're only 5 years old. This makes no sense. And that's kind of where I am and where I was back then. Because he's a very sweet boy. And these things just seem to happen randomly and without warning. And then the other times, he was a perfectly normal kid with no problems and very loving and caring of his brothers. So, all right. Early years continued. So, let's see. Okay, I already did that one. What's the next slide? There we go. What exactly is DMDD? Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, and I said that is a new diagnosis that's still being studied, is considered a mood disorder that goes above and beyond typical childhood moods. The main characteristics of DMDD is outbursts of angry and irritable moods. So normal kids have anger and irritability and temper tantrums. This is above the normal range of that. I personally feel like it's more like a childhood bipolar, even though the DSM criteria has more of a focus on anger. They took out childhood bipolar and replaced it with this diagnosis because it is possible for a child to outgrow this, and bipolar is considered an adult diagnosis. Bipolar consists of mood swings that can include episodes of extreme depression and episodes of psychosis. I believe this is more fitting to describe Micah. Not all kids with DMDD, but Micah specifically. Psychosis is essentially losing touch with reality and can lead to strange and even dangerous behaviors. So, like the stabbing in the hand, the running away, trying to run out into the middle of the street, trying to jump out of a second story window, those are behaviors that make no sense, that seem crazy, and they fall under the term of psychosis. Psychosis can also be like an extreme euphoria where you're just so happy and nothing's going to bring you down that you don't even think. And then, you combine that with ADHD where you have no impulse control, you just act. And it can lead to just dangerous things because it's like walking onto the street without checking both ways. You just don't think, you just do. So what does DMDD look like for Micah? Micah has long periods of time where he acts like a normal, well-behaved, happy boy. At other times, he has days or a week or 2 weeks that behaviors that are dangerous or odd, and this can also include outbursts of anger and aggression. He is more passive aggressive and has this idea that he can pay back any hurt caused him. He has strangled our cat, put his brother in the dryer and turned it on, and cut the heads off of teddy bears. He likes scary things and talks about dark objects, including death and blood and gore. He was more focused on the darker things when he was younger and has gotten better over time. He has spent 3 months in residential treatment in 2019, and this really had helped Micah. He has not had any major episodes or violent behaviors since his stay in 2019. However, I do see mood swings, and I'm diligently working to keep him in therapy and on the right medications to continue progress with him. It is our hope that he will outgrow it, as is a common result of DMDD. So as I said earlier, they do tend to outgrow DMDD. Not all of them. Once they reach puberty age, is where you're going to find out whether they will develop into a bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or, uh, you know, just a typical ADHD and anxiety and depression, or just double depression, or just nothing at all. So we really don't know, and we've been working very hard with Micah up until this point. He has been, like I said, he's been in inpatient psychiatric treatment twice, and he's been in residential treatment once. And while there were some benefits to those treatments, so like he learned coping mechanisms, he did different things like art therapy and animal therapy and uh, regular schooling in a small setting, regular counseling sessions, family sessions, and we behavioral adjustments with reward systems, or uh, learning how your actions affect others and then having to give back whatever you took from somebody when you harmed them. And so, like, for instance, he had been mean to the cat. So one of the things he had to do is he had to make our cat a gift to say that he was sorry and to give the cat something back for what he had done. Um, here in Idaho Falls, he is getting counseling, and he's in what's called CBRS. And so he works once a week with a worker in the community that works on similar things to help get through, change the way that he sees and thinks about things so that he makes good decisions. So the majority of the time, Mike is a very sweet, loving kid. And since his last stay, like I said, in 2019, we have not had any violent anything, or even that dark focus from Micah. He's been more of your typical kid with the occasional vindictive behaviors, but much, much better than he was. I don't think he sees things anymore, or if he does, he doesn't tell me, which is a little bit frustrating because it's just been a struggle learning how to deal with it and what to do and what's the proper thing to do and what's going to work and what's not going to work. And we don't want to alienate him and push him away and feel like we don't care about him, because we care immensely about him. So that's really the struggle when it comes to residential and doing inpatient treatment, because you don't want your kid to feel like you don't want anything to do with them. But at the same time, you can't have them be aggressive in a really bad situation where they might harm themselves or others. So it really is hard and a struggle on parents that are dealing with these types of things, and then trying to understand where they came from, what does it mean, how do I help it, and is there any way to help it. I still don't have the answers to that, to be honest. So my worries. I worry that without medication, Micah may make poor decisions that could result in criminal charges if he does not grow out of this by the time that he becomes an adult. I worry that he lacks empathy, and I do not know how to teach that or if it can be taught. I worry that Micah will need mental health support for the rest of his life, and I worry what his diagnosis will turn into as he becomes an adult. DMDD is a childhood diagnosis, and if he continues to have mood swings, lack of empathy, and seeing and hearing things, he may get diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia and or conduct disorder. So that just goes for what it said. That it is what it is. I worry about those things as a parent, and I think other people that are dealing with DMD are potentially going to be worrying about similar things. All I can do is pray and continue the treatment. I feel like Mike is doing better here in Idaho than he was in Virginia. And I haven't had as many worries about him since we've moved. So, I mean, maybe just the moving out of that environment. I know he dealt with being bullied a lot in the last school that we were in. And maybe that contributed a lot to some of his behaviors, but he seems to be doing much, much better now. But I am keeping an eye on him, and I do worry, as all parents do. So what are our plans for now? So this may be updated because I made this a little bit ago, but Mike is starting a service where he will meet with the mental health provider up to 3 hours at a time during the week. That's the CBRS. He will continue on counseling once a week and going out on respite trips with his brothers once a week. And he will have his medication managed by psychiatrists likely every 3 months unless we have a problem. And we will continue to look at other options for treatment if they are needed and or become available. So right now we're just doing those things. I think his counseling's gone to every other week. Waiting lists have been really long here, but I wanted to get Micah in because he's the one that I worry about the most of all of my kids. So I got him in first, but we have been able to switch him to every other week. He does get the CBRS every week, and then they also have respite every week. So we have those things going for us. Good things about Micah. So I don't want to just focus on the DMDD, although that was my focus of the PowerPoint. I just want you to know some good things about Micah. Micah loves art, specifically drawing, and he's very good at it. For the past holidays, I bought him a comic strip book for him to write on and draw on, and then I just recently got him a how to draw a Pokemon character book. So he loves art. He can be very sweet and helpful with his brothers, especially the younger ones. He likes to play Minecraft and Roblox. If he likes you, he'll protect you and stand up for you no matter what. That's very, very true. He's very protective of his family and anybody that he considers a friend. Don't mess with Micah's friends because he will tell you like it is. Don't mess with my friend. He's my friend and you be nice to him. Or they're my brothers and you will treat them nicely. His favorite color is green, and he likes gems and rocks. I like to buy him those little treasure things where you dig through them and you can find, gold or silver or a stone or anything like that. He loves those things. And he also likes books on rocks and gems and the colors and what they are and how they work. He enjoys sensory play and being very active, and not all sensory. So if you pick him up and twirl him around, he might freak out and get scared because he still has kind of that anxiety. But he does like to play outside, jump on the trampoline, and I just bought them a ninja kit. And I'm hoping that we can get that set up in our backyard so they can play with that soon. Other than that, he does prefer to be alone and he keeps a very small group of friends. He's not too fond of reading, but will read comic books more than anything else. And reading has been a struggle for Micah as well as his spelling, which that's part of the things that I've been working with the school on for Micah. Is I've always had a concern that he might be dyslexic or have some kind of reading disability because reading has been difficult for him and his scores have been lower. And they just keep telling me he's fine, there's nothing wrong with him. Well, if you struggle with reading, it makes everything else more difficult, especially at the 6th grade level, and he's going to 7th grade next year, and he has a hard time completing assignments on time and keeping up with his work. And I really feel like reading is the issue, but I just can't get it into a proper length, so I don't know what else to do about that. But we tried the comic books to see if we can't get him more interested in reading and to increase his skills. He is mostly happy and very attached to mom and dad. He does want a lot of attention, and we do our best to give him as much attention as we can, having 7 kids. But we'll take him out by himself to the store, and we have done mom and dad dates in the past where we just take one kid out. And if I need to go on a shopping trip, I'll just take Micah with me. And I usually, whenever I take one kid out to do anything, I always buy them, a drink or a snack or a little toy or something to just give each one of them individual time with mom and dad. He will take every bit of time he can get alone with mom and dad, which is very true. So if you have any questions for him, it may take a little time to get him to speak to you, but we will encourage it. So if you want to talk to Micah and know a little bit more about him, like I said, he's going to be very reserved. He's anxious. It's going to take a little while for him to open up. But we can encourage that, and I'd love for him to talk to more people and to make more friends. So if you're interested in talking to him, he does have a cell phone. It's only for emergencies and sometimes talking to his friend Jack in Virginia. So if you do want to talk to him, I can make that happen under adult supervision. So how can you help? Learn more about DMDD and share your knowledge with others. DMD is so new, people don't even know what it is a lot of times, and it is one of those diagnoses that is just gut-wrenching and hard to deal with as a parent, and it's hard to explain to other people as well. So if you know anybody that has children that have DMDD, or other children that are dealing with DMDD, feel free to look at Micah's story, and you can speak to my husband and I and the different things that we've done, how we've addressed our behaviors. When I go through these things, I focus more on the disability itself and the diagnosis. I don't spend so much time talking about treatment, because treatment is going to be tailored to individual kids. It's not going to be the same for everybody else. I can mention, medications, and I can give you a few names of medications like Abilify, and there are other antipsychotics out there that can be used to treat for DMDD, as well as depression medications like Strattera, Zoloft. There's so many meds out there that I'm not an expert in that. I have had people ask me before, what medication do your kids take for this? And it's funny because I have 5 kids with ADHD, and they all, except for 2, that take the same thing. The other ones just take other meds. So they're not even on like the same medications, and we've gone through several different ones. So I have pretty good knowledge on ADHD medicine. But even my own kids that have the similar genetics aren't even taking the same medications because they don't work the same for everybody. So you really have to work with a professional when it comes to medication management, treatment options. As far as counseling, you have to find the right counselor, because not every counselor, not every way of counseling is effective. So there's multiple different types of counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, and there are parent-child interactive therapies, and there's so many therapies out there. And you can look up online and see which ones are more effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the more effective behavior treatments for this type of diagnosis. And then, community programs, social interactions and social activities, art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy. There's so many therapies out there. And that's also what makes things complicated, because you don't really know what to do. And honestly, you gotta just have to try different things and see what works and what doesn't work. Micah loves art, so art therapy is a good choice for him. If your kid doesn't like art, art's not a good choice. So you just need a lot of positive interaction. We've also dealt with punitive discipline, not like, more like a negative consequences versus positive consequences. And a lot of people don't understand that, but if you focus on praising and rewarding the good things that they do, and not focusing on the bad things that they do, a lot of times that increases the more positive behaviors, especially when they're like Micah and they want attention. So if they get a lot of attention for the positive things that they do, they're less likely to do the negative things. It doesn't mean you ignore the negative things, but you put less focus on those negative things. And then the type of therapy where if you cause harm, you have to give back to the person or the thing that you caused harm to, and not just what you caused harm, but double that. Kind of like it was in the Bible. So like if you stole something, you had to replace what you stole and then some. So that's another type of way to deal with some of those negative behaviors. And I'm rambling on, but moving on. Reach out and be supportive to Micah. Micah definitely needs a lot more positive, uplifting interactions in his life, knowing what he likes, being willing to play with him. And when he has a time where he's not in a good mood or he's anxious or he's getting into a temper tantrum, to just be understanding and caring and gently move him back into the way that he needs to be. And a lot of times just telling him, hey, Micah, you're going down the wrong way of thinking. Let's move back to a positive way of thinking. Or how about we go play outside with the ball or something, or, that type of thing. So definitely could use your prayers for Micah as we work through this new kind of thing. Not sure what's going to happen with it, what all the behaviors mean, why he randomly does things that just make no sense to us, and how we can work forward for a more positive outcome in the future for Micah. And that's it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, share this video. There are some things in here that I don't really like talking about, obviously, but I'm going to be open and honest with you about these things. And I hope that we can bring awareness to these diagnoses and what people are really dealing with, and get rid of the stigmatism and, untrue beliefs about these things, and just really help these kids and lead them into a more brighter future. So, okay, everybody, I will be back later. I'm doing some random shows, but I'm going to try to do videos at least on Monday and Friday every week. So long as there's no emergency and I don't have any problem, that is my plan. I still haven't figured out how to. I do have a green screen, but I haven't figured out how to use it during a live broadcast. As far as I can't on my phone. I may be able to do on my laptop, but since my laptop's audio and microphone don't work, I can't really do that yet. So I hope everybody is having a great day, and I will talk to you all later.